Uh, One of the things, Gary, is right down your pike, that this whole thing, the historical basis for Jesus' death and the resurrection appearances. Bagent says, and it's copied over in a lot of ways in things in the Da Vinci Code, but one of the things that Bagent says is he was drugged. Now we're going back to what is called the old swoon theory. And it's very interesting to me that smart scholars like Elaine Pagels at Princeton kind of said, we need to investigate that all over again. This is Hugh Schoenfield's Passover plot, the swoon theory. This has been dead for a long time, that theory all by itself. Why in the world is that resurrecting itself right now? And let's knock it dead again.
Well, it's the old idea of what goes around comes around. The swoon or apparent death theory was the most popular critique of the resurrection of Jesus prior to about 1830. And in 1835, David Strauss wrote a famous Life of Jesus in which he critiques this view. His major critique was the problem with apparent death is that no one who's struggling, who survives the tomb, should have died on the cross, didn't. Should have died in the tomb, didn't. Can't roll the stone away, did. Now Strauss didn't accept the guard, but he walks on feet pierced by nails to where the disciples are, and he holds his hands up and he says, I told you I would rise again from the dead. And what's he look like? He hasn't washed his hair. He's bleeding again. He's bleeding through his clothes. He's limping badly. And the phrase that comes from Strauss, the disciples would get a doctor rather than proclaim him risen. In other words, here's what comes out of the apparent death theory. Alive? Yes. Risen? No way. There's a lot of difference, and people don't make that distinction. Alive? Yes. Risen? No. Because you have two problems. First of all, the man you see in front of you is not raised from the dead. And Peter maybe is shouting out, go get a doctor, get some rags, get some water. They know he's in bad shape. And then you've got one of the disciples over in the corner. Almost 20 times in the New Testament we are told that believers will be raised like Jesus. And you got a disciple over there saying, oh boy, someday I'm going to have a resurrection body just like this one. The problem is the theory doesn't work. It doesn't translate from that kind of life to eternal life. And therefore, the church is without cause.
Yeah, then you have to come back and say, where in the world did they get the message of resurrection if Jesus was in a bloody form and later on he must have crawled into the bushes and died or something?
Well, I don't doubt. The critics are right. They would say, wow, God spared him. Yes, they would say that. Could they see an answer to prayer? Yeah, if he survived the cross, I'd say this is a miracle. But you don't go from that to resurrection. Alive is not raised. Look at Lazarus. He dies again, right? These other people die again. So alive is not raised. Somehow you have to make that gap. And I will say this, with all the other critiques of apparent death that are around today, medical ideas and other things, Strauss's critique still reigns true. I just did a count recently of what scholars say. First of all, you can count guys on one hand. Of the 2,400 sources since 1975 on the resurrection, French, German, English, this many, I mean not five, but I mean on one hand you can count those who think apparent death. When scholars respond, they still cite Strauss. I think all of us would like to have that kind of influence in our writings, but Strauss's critique has been around for almost 200 years as the knockdown critique